Now, Konstantin Boym, who is a designer and president of Boym Partners, is going to speak about From the Spoon to the City.
We'll talk later. All right. So, Ernesto Rogers, one of the founding fathers of Italian design, has famously said that the field of a true designer's expertise should stretch from the spoon to the city. I have not seen Lazar Khidekel's designs for spoons, but I have studied his projects for cups and plates, for lighting and furniture, even for shoes, coats, and hats. And Khidekel certainly designed cities, floating cities, visionary cities suspended in the air over fields and parks, and also real cities with streets and squares, which he had sketched and laid out throughout his long life. At first glance, Khidekel's encyclopedic design interests appear to fit snugly with the transformative pathos of the 1920s artistic activities in Russia. The ultimate idea of Russian avant-garde was to bring art into life, or rather to redesign life itself, all aspects of life, from patterns of social behavior to physical human environments. The work of constructivists, in particular, had applied a special rigor to the functional transformation of people's living and working conditions. Yet the approach of Lazar Khidekel was different and much more complex. A pupil of Malevich, he came to architecture and design from the theoretical platform of suprematism. As we heard already multiple times today, suprematism was an aesthetic movement primarily, removed from any ideological or utilitarian consideration. It was a search for a superior language of art. Suprematists didn't see transformation of everyday life as their programmatic goal. Yet they realized that their new art would be a catalyst for creation of new reality. Malevich's iconic black square was not the end of art, but rather a new beginning, a ground zero, an arena for free exploration and experimentation. In Lazar Khidekel's tiny sketches, they tried to save paper in those years. The black square gets dissected, fragmented, rotated in an attempt to achieve the movement of mass, the expression of weightlessness. Various textures were used, from rough cardboard to white glue and sparkling silver, which gave the drawings an almost architectonic dimension. Often the lines are drawn with the help of a drafting ruler and a compass, and the drawings are accompanied by hasty notes scribbled in pencil. Characteristically, Lazar always referred to his sketches as projects. There was only a small step from non-objectivism to creation of new objects. In the 1920s, the architecture was seen as a paramount artistic activity. With Malevich's blessing, architecture has become Lazar Khidekel's chosen field for the rest of his life. He sketched aero cities, floating habitats of the future, which bravely unified natural and man-made worlds. What was lacking in technical detail was redeemed by suggestive power of artistic vision. As has been already noted, these visionary concepts predate megastructures of Yonah Friedman by at least 30 years. Khidekel's most famous architectural project happened to be one of his first. His Workers' Club of 1926 was a mature work of suprematism, ably translated into architectural language. The perspective drawing of this building, which looks surprisingly fresh even in 2013, is suggestive of rich possibilities for the development of suprematism idiom in architecture. This Workers' Club was not realized, but we can imagine the building's potential impact from a short list of built works, that Khidekel created in the studio of Alexander Nikolsky, where he was employed for most of his life, I believe. The building at Metalworkers Stadium in particularly, and this is late 1920s, shows much similarity to Khidekel's unrealized projects. Almost improbably, this forceful and pure suprematist composition is no longer confined in paper, but rises in 3 dimensions as a building of steel, glass, and plaster. I don't know if it still exists in Leningrad. No, unfortunately not. But it was built and it existed in the real world. Lazar Khidekel's flexible and expressive architectural language proved to be surprisingly adaptable for the changing times. After 1930, when many architects had to make a complete revision of their artistic approach, Khidekel's work remained recognizable. His dynamic suprematist massing is often discernible after the then obligatory layer of historicist ornament. This is a project of a school in Leningrad of 1935. It was in the later post-World War II years that Lazar started to address issues of object design in a systematic way. Designs for vases and bowls went hand in hand with architectural exploration, often on the 2 sides of the same sheet of drafting paper. And in fact, these are 2 sides of the same drawing, from the spoon to the city, indeed. Perhaps Khidekel's purchase of a small lot in the countryside near Leningrad and construction of a summer dacha stimulated his interest in domestic environment and furnishings. This dacha, virtually unknown among architectural historians, deserves a special study beyond the scope of my short talk. In small massing sketches, the building resembles a floating suprematist composition full of movement and dramatic interplay of light and shadow. The worm's eye perspective makes the building look larger and more monumental than it actually was. Yet, in Soviet reality, only limited funds and building materials were available for construction of anyone's private dacha. Traditional wooden construction was more or less a predetermined choice. Khidekel's building, thus, becomes an unprecedented example of what might be called vernacular suprematism. In other words, an avant-garde composition rendered in the idiom of traditional wooden Russian architecture. You can see here the quite modern composition of the interior has inside a very traditional vignette of this conventional living room. And even more tellingly, the building of, like a dacha, which many multitudes of them were built all around Soviet Union, based itself on the architectural language of the izba, of peasant house. But here you can see the patterns on the shutters are of a completely different nature and a different architectural and artistic idiom. Similar characteristics distinguish many of Khidekel's design objects, where archetypal shapes are often combined with bold architectonic decorations. Stylistically, Khidekel's brightly striped vases and plates remind me of the work of his Italian design contemporaries, Gio Ponti and Bruno Munari. These are plates, in fact, by Gio Ponti, made in Italy in late 1950s. And these are designs by Khidekel. Khidekel again. Perhaps the connection is not entirely coincidental. After all, in the late 1950s, both Russia and Italy had experienced a profound cultural transformation, having emerged from hard years of dictatorship and war. In both countries, the architects wanted to reconcile historicist language of the 1930s and 40s with their own early modernist heritage. Yet, there was also a profound difference. Lazar Khidekel's designs were not intended for mass productions. They were never commissioned, nor claimed by any factory or ministry. Rather, he created these objects for himself and his family, having them manufactured by local handymen from simple materials, wood, copper, porcelain, wool. This is a sketch of the design of a chandelier for the staircase of the dacha. As you can see, it's made out of found trunk of the wood, or a root perhaps of a tree. In the cultural context of Soviet Union, a country of megalomaniac projects and grandiose monuments, the very idea of paying attention to humble domestic objects of everyday life was a conspicuous humanitarian gesture, a desire not shared by many architects at the time. Svetlana Boym has written about the late work of Vladimir Tatlin, another great master of Russian avant-garde, who spent his late years painting realistic and conventional still life paintings. Still lifes are reminders of the other, non-revolutionary rhythms of everyday life. They preserve the dream of home, of domesticated nature. They survive historical cataclysms and artistic and social revolutions. Similarly, most of the Khidekel's late design for furniture and objects and clothes are about home. Their forms are functional and sometimes traditional. The master appears to be craving for simplicity and common sense. It's a design for shoes. Good humor had to be playing a role in such unprepossessing ideas as his sketches for shoes and for winter hats, and even proposals for the new hairstyles for the bald, something for which Lazar had a personal need. To translate from the Russian, the one on the top says bad, the other one down good. The bald spot is enlarged. Only very occasional, however rational, these designs never pay tribute to minimalism or machine aesthetics. Rather, they aspire for a celebration of domesticity and private life. Only very occasionally one would find a visual reminder of his avant-garde beginning. On a number of pages, Lazar lovingly sketched a small three-dimensional bookshelf, a floating suprematism composition, studying and reimagining the object again and again. This shelf, I was told, was later constructed, and the architect had it installed in his studio at his dacha. At least one small error city found its realization. It remained at Khidekel's studio for years, like a souvenir of the architect's glorious suprematist past. Thank you.